The screaming stopped at exactly 11:47 p.m., and that's when I knew my wife was lying about book club. I'd been installing a new security camera in our bedroom. Rachel had been complaining about strange noises. When I picked up audio from her car's Bluetooth system, the range was supposed to be 30 feet max, but somehow I was getting crystal clear transmission from wherever she'd driven off to 3 hours ago. Oh, God, yes, don't stop. Rachel's voice came through my headphones like a knife through my chest. Then a man's voice. You like that, don't you? You dirty little... I ripped the headphones off and stared at the green light blinking on my receiver. 36 years old, 15 years married, and I'm finding out my wife's cheating through a goddamn audio feed. My hands shook as I rewound the digital file. Maybe I'd heard wrong. Maybe it was a movie, or harder, please Leo, harder, Leo, my best friend since high school, the guy who was best man at our wedding, who came over for Sunday football every week, who hugged me last month when I got laid off from the radio station and told me everything would work out. I sat in our bedroom for 2 hours, listening to my wife screw my best friend while some kind of weird chanting played in the background. When Rachel's car finally pulled into our driveway at 2:15 a.m., I pretended to be asleep. She slipped into bed smelling like sage and something else I couldn't identify, something musky and wrong. How was book club? I whispered. Oh, her body went rigid. Fine. We discussed that new thriller everyone's reading. Which one? A pause. The one about the woman who disappears. What's it called? Another pause, longer this time. I don't remember the exact title. I turned over and looked at her in the darkness. Rachel was staring at the ceiling, her jaw clenched tight. You smell different, I said. New soap at Melissa's house? Melissa. Another lie. I'd heard Leo say her name was Nina during their session, and something about masks, and something about next Tuesday at the cabin. I went to work the next day, freelance audio editing in my basement workshop, and tried to focus on the corporate training video I was mixing. But every 10 minutes, I found myself rewinding that recording, looking for clues I'd missed. At 3 p.m., my sister Tess showed up with coffee and that concerned look she'd been wearing a lot lately. You seem stressed, she said, perching on my workbench like she owned the place. Rachel mentioned you've been having trouble sleeping. Rachel talks to you about our marriage? We're friends, Ethan. Sisters-in-law should be close, right? Tess smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes. Maybe you should talk to someone. Mom knows a great therapist. Mom, Nina Darrow, retired psychiatrist, the woman who'd been pushing me to get help ever since I lost my job. Always suggesting I needed medication, needed to process my feelings, needed to take a break from everything. I'm fine, I said. Tess leaned closer. Are you, though? Rachel's worried you might be monitoring her. My blood froze. What do you mean? Just that marriage requires trust. And if you're tracking her movements or checking up on her, I'm not tracking anyone. But Tess was studying my equipment with new interest. The receivers, the frequency analyzers, the digital recording setup I used for work. This stuff could pick up cell phone calls, couldn't it? She asked casually. Not legally. But technically, I stared at my sister. 29 years old, works part-time at a boutique, still lives in Mom's old house. When had she become so interested in surveillance technology? Tess, why are you really here? She stood up and smoothed her skirt. Just checking on my big brother. But maybe you should be more careful about what you think you're hearing. Audio can be misleading. After she left, I played the recording again. This time, I noticed something I'd missed before. Underneath Rachel and Leo's voices, there was a steady electronic hum, the kind you get from cheap wireless microphones. They knew they were being recorded, which meant someone had wanted me to hear it. I spent the next 3 days acting normal while secretly installing more sophisticated equipment. If this was a game, I needed to understand the rules. Tuesday night came. Rachel said she was going to yoga class. I followed her. She drove 40 minutes into the mountains above Fern Ridge, past the old logging roads to a cabin I'd never seen before. There were 6 cars in the clearing. I recognized Leo's truck, and Mom's silver sedan and Tess's Honda. My whole family was here. I parked a quarter-mile away and hiked through the trees until I could see the cabin windows. Orange light flickered inside. Candles, maybe, or a fire. I pulled out my binoculars and adjusted the focus. Rachel was without clothes from the waist up, kneeling on the floor. A man in a leather mask shaped like a bull's head stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders. Other figures moved in the shadows, some without clothes, some wearing masks, all of them focused on whatever ritual was happening in the center of the room. My mother sat in a chair by the fireplace, fully clothed, watching everything with the clinical detachment she'd perfected during 30 years of psychiatric practice. Tess was there too, wearing only a red mask and laughing at something someone had whispered in her ear. And Leo, Christ, Leo was filming it all with a professional camera setup. I watched for 20 minutes, my stomach churning until I couldn't take anymore. But as I turned to leave, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. A girl in a white mask stared back at me. Maybe 25, athletic build, holding what looked like a taser. "Who are you?" I whispered. Instead of answering, she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a black van parked behind the trees. Two men emerged from the shadows, one carrying zip ties, the other a baseball bat. They zip-tied my hands and threw me in the back of the van. The girl climbed in after me and pulled off her mask. It wasn't a girl at all. It was my mother. "Hello, sweetheart," Nina said in that calm therapist voice she'd used when I was a kid and had broken something valuable. "We need to talk." The van started moving. Through the rear windows, I watched the cabin lights disappear behind the trees. "You've been a very busy boy," Mom continued. "Recording phone calls, following your wife, installing cameras. That's called stalking, Ethan. It's illegal." "What the hell is going on?" I struggled against the zip ties. What was that back there? Adults having consensual fun. Nothing that concerns you. Rachel's my wife. Rachel is a grown woman who makes her own choices, just like Tess, just like Leo. Mom leaned forward. "Just like me. How long has this been happening? Does it matter?" "How long, Mom?" she sighed. 3 years, maybe 4. Time blurs when you're enjoying yourself. 3 years. Leo had been coming to Sunday dinner for 3 years, sitting at my table, drinking my beer, talking about work and sports and normal things while secretly screwing my wife at masked bacchanalias organized by my own mother. "Why?" My voice cracked like I was 12 years old again. "Because you're boring, Ethan. You've always been boring. Rachel needed excitement. Leo needed adventure. Tess needed to feel special. And I needed to feel useful again after retirement." Mom smoothed her skirt. "We all got what we needed. What about what I needed?" "You needed to stay ignorant. It was better for everyone that way." The van stopped. We were on a forest road I didn't recognize, surrounded by tall pines and darkness. "Here's what's going to happen," Mom said as the back doors opened. "You're going to walk home. You're going to forget everything you saw tonight. You're going to stop monitoring Rachel and stop asking questions. And in return, we'll let you keep your nice little life. And if I don't," Mom smiled, "then we'll have to discuss your recent unemployment with the police, and your drinking problem, and your history of depression, and the restraining order Rachel will file tomorrow morning." They cut the zip ties and pushed me out of the van. My wallet and keys landed in the dirt beside me. 3 miles that way," one of the men said, pointing down the road. "Start walking." The van drove off, leaving me alone in the mountains at 3 in the morning. I walked for 2 hours, my mind spinning with rage and humiliation and disbelief. By the time I reached our house, Rachel was already asleep, still smelling like sage and Zex. The next morning, she made me pancakes and asked about my day like nothing had happened. "Sleep well," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Like a baby?" "Good. You seemed restless lately." I watched her move around our kitchen, in her yoga pants and tank top, pouring orange juice and humming softly. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of thinking I knew this person. "Rachel," I said carefully, "do you love me?" She froze with the juice carton in her hand. "Of course I do. Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering." "Don't wonder about things like that, Ethan. It's not healthy." "Not healthy," Mom's phrase. I spent the day setting up new equipment. If they thought I was going to roll over and forget what I'd seen, they were wrong. But this time I'd be smarter about it. I installed micro cameras in Leo's apartment while he was at work, hacked into Mom's email account using her old passwords, put a GPS tracker on Tess's car using magnets. Over the next week, I documented everything. Leo had videos on his computer, dozens of them going back months. Different locations, different participants, but always the same core group. My family, my friends, my life. In one video, Rachel was bent over a table while 3 men took turns with her. She was moaning and screaming and begging for more, her face twisted with pleasure I'd never seen at home. In another, Tess was tied to a chair while someone in a devil mask whipped her back with a leather strap. She was crying, But the tears looked fake, theatrical. And in the most recent one, filmed just last week, Mom was giving instructions to the whole group like she was running a therapy session. "Remember," she said into the camera, "this is about liberation, about freeing ourselves from society's constraints, about taking what we want instead of asking permission." A voice from off camera. "What about Ethan? Ethan is a problem that will solve itself. He's weak. He'll accept whatever reality we give him because the alternative is too frightening to contemplate." More voices, laughing and agreeing. "Besides," Mom continued, "if he becomes too much trouble, we have options. Rachel's already planted the seeds. Depression, paranoia, possible substance misuse. One phone call to the right people and Ethan disappears into the mental health system for as long as we need." I sat in my basement workshop, staring at the screen, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. They thought I was weak. They thought I was stupid. They thought I would just roll over and take it forever. I saved all the files to encrypted drives and started planning. The next gathering was scheduled for Friday night at a new location, an abandoned radio tower in the state forest. According to their emails, this was going to be the biggest event yet, some kind of initiation ceremony for new members. I had 4 days to get ready. I drove out to the radio tower on Wednesday to scout the location. The building had been empty since the 1970s, but the structure was solid. Concrete walls, steel framework, narrow windows, perfect for observation. More importantly, there was an old maintenance tunnel that ran from the base of the tower to an exit point half a mile away. The tunnel was partially collapsed, but I could clear enough debris to make it passable. I spent Thursday preparing equipment. Smoke grenades from an army surplus store, flashbangs ordered online, a sound system powerful enough to shatter windows, and other things. Things I'd learned how to make from YouTube videos and electronics forums. Rachel noticed my mood change. "You seem different," she said Thursday night over dinner. "Good different or bad different?" "I'm not sure." I smiled. "Maybe I'm finally growing up." She studied my face like she was looking for cracks in a mask. "Mom thinks you should consider medication just to help with the transition." "What transition?" "Unemployment, middle age. You know." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "Sometimes life requires chemical assistance." Her skin felt cold, or maybe mine was just warmer than usual. "I'll think about it," I said. That night, I pretended to take the sleeping pill she brought me with a glass of water. Instead, I palmed it and flushed it down the toilet after she went to bed. Then, I spent the night making final preparations. Friday evening came. Rachel got dressed in black clothes and kissed me goodbye. "Book club again?" I asked. "You know it." She paused at the door. "Will you be okay alone tonight? I'll find something to do." After she left, I loaded my equipment into the truck and drove to the radio tower. I parked the truck at the tunnel exit and hiked back through the forest, carrying everything in a military surplus backpack. The cars started arriving at sunset. Leo's truck, Mom's sedan, Tess's Honda, plus 8 others I didn't recognize. I climbed into the radio tower through a broken ground floor window and set up my equipment on the 3rd level. The participants were gathering in the main room below, lighting candles and arranging furniture. Through my night vision scope, I watched them prepare for whatever sick ritual they had planned. Masks were distributed, clothing was removed. Someone set up camera equipment in 3 corners of the room. Rachel appeared wearing a white mask shaped like a deer's head. She was completely without clothes, her body pale and beautiful in the candlelight. Leo wore his bull mask and nothing else. His body was scarred and tattooed in ways I'd never seen before. Tess had chosen a cat mask. She was laughing and touching the other participants like she'd done this 1,000 times. And Mom sat in the center of it all, unmasked and fully clothed, holding a leather whip like a conductor's baton. "Welcome, friends," she said in her calm therapist voice. "Tonight, we celebrate the initiation of our new members. Tonight, we show them what true freedom looks like." She gestured to 3 people I didn't recognize. 2 women and a man, all young, all nervous-looking. "But first," Mom continued, "we must cleanse ourselves of the old world's constraints. We must shed our false identities and embrace our authentic selves." The group began chanting something in what sounded like Latin. The candles flickered. Someone started playing drums. I activated my equipment. The first smoke grenade went off in the northeast corner, filling that section of the room with thick gray fog. Before anyone could react, the second grenade detonated near the entrance. Shouts of confusion echoed through the building. Then I triggered the sound system. The noise was incredible. A feedback loop so loud and harsh it felt like ice picks in your brain. I'd calibrated it specifically to cause disorientation and panic without permanent hearing damage. The participants stumbled around in the smoke and darkness, shouting and bumping into each other. Some tried to run for the exits, but I'd triggered more smoke grenades to block the doorways. Through my scope, I watched Leo grab Rachel's arm and try to pull her toward a window. But the flashbangs went off before they could reach it, filling the room with blinding white light. I gave them 30 seconds to recover, then triggered the recording system. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," my voice boomed through the speakers, electronically distorted but still recognizable. "This is your host, Ethan Darrow. Thank you for attending tonight's special presentation." The room went silent, except for the crackling of overturned candles. For those who don't know me, I'm Rachel's husband, Leo's best friend, Nina's son, Tess's brother, the boring one, the weak one, the one who was supposed to stay ignorant forever. I triggered another smoke grenade. But ignorance is bliss only if you never wake up, and I'm very much awake now. Through the chaos, I could see Mom trying to organize some kind of response. She was shouting orders, but the smoke and noise made communication impossible. "Nina Darrow," I continued, "retired psychiatrist, mother of the year, thinks I'm too weak to handle the truth about my family. She's organized this little club as therapy for her own twisted needs." A new voice cut through the speaker system. Leo, shouting into the darkness, "Ethan, stop this! We can talk!" I laughed, and the sound echoed off the concrete walls like thunder. "Talk? We've been talking for 3 years, Leo. Every Sunday over beer and football, you've been talking. Telling me what a good friend you are. Telling me how Rachel and I are lucky to have each other." More smoke, more flashbangs. "Rachel Darrow," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than screaming. "My beautiful spiritual wife, the woman who makes love to me twice a month with her eyes closed and fakes peeks like she's reading from a script." I could see her stumbling through the smoke, her deer mask gone, her face streaked with tears and soot. But watch her here in this room, with these people. Watch how she moves, how she sounds, how she comes alive when she thinks I can't see. I activated the video system I'd installed earlier in the week. Footage from their previous gatherings began playing on screens around the room. Rachel with Leo, Rachel with strangers, Rachel begging for things she'd never asked me for. "This is who my wife really is," I announced. "Not the yoga teacher who talks about inner peace and spiritual growth. This animal in heat, performing for cameras and strangers while her husband works 60-hour weeks to pay for her enlightenment." Someone was screaming now. Maybe Rachel. Maybe Tess. It was hard to tell through the chaos. I triggered the final wave of equipment. Gas canisters began releasing something I'd mixed from household chemicals. Not toxic, but nauseating enough to make breathing difficult. The sound system switched to a frequency that induced vertigo, and the lights began strobing in patterns designed to trigger seizures in susceptible individuals. "You wanted to show me who you really are," I said, as the building filled with smoke and screaming and the smell of chemical fog. Mission accomplished. I shouldered my pack and headed for the maintenance tunnel, leaving them to find their own way out of the building. The tunnel was exactly as I'd left it, partially collapsed, barely passable but functional. I crawled through 50 yards of concrete debris and rusted pipes until I reached the exit point near my truck. By the time I drove away, I could see flashlights moving around the radio tower. They'd figured out how to escape, which was fine. I hadn't intended to actually hurt anyone tonight. Tonight was just the opening act. I drove home and waited for Rachel. She came back at 4 a.m., covered in soot and reeking of chemicals. Her clothes were torn and her hands were bleeding from scrambling through the broken windows. "Rough book club?" I asked from the kitchen table. She stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. "You... Me what?" "That was you, at the tower." I sipped my coffee and smiled. "I don't know what you're talking about, honey. I've been here all night. Want some breakfast?" She backed toward the doorway like I was holding a weapon. "Rachel," I said gently, "we should probably talk about some things. About Leo, about Mom, about the choices you've been making. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything." I pulled out my phone and played a video clip. Rachel moaning Leo's name while someone in a devil mask spanked her with a paddle. "I know about the cabin, the masks, the cameras, the initiation ceremonies, all of it." She sank into a chair, her face pale as death. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want you to understand something. For 3 years, you've been treating me like I'm stupid, like I'm weak. Like I'm some pathetic husband who'll accept whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. I leaned forward. But weakness and stupidity aren't the same thing, Rachel. I'm not weak. I'm just patient. And my patience has run out. Over the next week, I systematically destroyed their little club. I released edited footage online, faces blurred for legal reasons, but bodies and voices clearly identifiable to anyone who knew them. Rachel's yoga studio lost half its clients within 3 days. Leo was suspended from his job pending an investigation. 2 of the other participants were arrested when their employers saw the videos, but I wasn't finished. I'd learned something important from watching their videos. They kept detailed records, financial transactions, membership lists, blackmail material on local politicians and business leaders. Mom had been using the club to gather compromising material on half the town's leadership. She had photos of Mayor Coldwell with underage courtesans, videos of Police Chief Martinez taking bribes, financial records showing Judge Patterson laundering money through fake charities. The club wasn't just about Zex, it was about power. And now I had all their files. I started making phone calls. Mayor Coldwell, this is Ethan Darrow. I think we should meet. The mayor arrived at my house that evening, nervous and sweating despite the cool October weather. What do you want? He asked without preamble. I showed him the photos. Him with 3 girls who couldn't have been older than 16. Him counting stacks of cash in what looked like a hotel room. Him signing documents that transferred city contracts to companies owned by club members. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Where did you get these? Does it matter? What do you want? He repeated. I want you to resign, tonight, effective immediately. Health reasons or family concerns or whatever excuse you prefer. But I want you gone. And if I don't, I played a video clip on my laptop. The mayor's voice, clear as daylight. The city council will approve whatever contracts I tell them to approve. The police chief answers to me. And if anyone asks questions, we have enough dirt on them to end their careers. Coldwell stared at the screen, his face gray. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you a choice. Resign gracefully and disappear, or have your entire life destroyed in public. Your call. He resigned the next morning. Police Chief Martinez was next, then Judge Patterson, then the school superintendent and 3 city council members. Within 2 weeks, half of Fernridge's leadership had either resigned or been arrested. The local newspaper called it the biggest corruption scandal in county history, but I still wasn't finished with the people who mattered most. Leo was the easiest target. I knew his routines, his weaknesses, his fears. I'd been his best friend for 20 years. I caught him alone in his apartment on a Wednesday night, drunk and feeling sorry for himself after losing his job. He opened the door thinking I was there to comfort him. Ethan, thank God you're here, he said, reeking of bourbon. This whole thing is insane. Someone's trying to destroy us all, and I think it might be... I shot him with the taser. When he woke up, he was zip-tied to a chair in his own living room, facing a camera I'd set up on his coffee table. What the hell? He struggled against the restraints. Ethan, what are you doing? Making a movie, I said, adjusting the camera angle. You like movies, don't you, Leo? You've made quite a few lately. I showed him clips from his own computer, him with Rachel, him with Tess, him with strangers whose names I didn't know. That's different, he said desperately. We were just having fun. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got hurt? I laughed. Leo, you've been screwing my wife for 3 years. You've been coming to my house, eating my food, pretending to be my friend while secretly planning to destroy my marriage. How is that not hurting somebody? It wasn't like that. What was it like then? He struggled with the zip ties, cutting into his wrists. It was Rachel's idea. She said you 2 were having problems. She said she needed something exciting in her life. So you decided to help her out. She seduced me, man. I tried to say no, but she kept pushing, and your mom said it would be good for everyone if Rachel had an outlet. I backhanded him across the face, hard. Don't you dare blame this on Rachel. Don't you dare blame it on my mother. You made a choice, Leo. Every time you touched my wife, every time you lied to my face, every time you sat at my dinner table and pretended to be my friend, those were choices. Blood trickled from his nose. What do you want from me? I want you to tell the truth, on camera, about everything. And then what? Then we'll see. It took 3 hours, but I got it all. Every detail of how the affair started, how Mom had organized the club, how they'd planned to drive me into a mental breakdown if I ever found out, how they'd laughed about my ignorance and stupidity. We never meant for it to go this far, Leo said finally, his voice hoarse from talking. It was supposed to be temporary, just until you got back on your feet. Got back on my feet from what? From being such a damn loser. The words exploded out of him like he'd been holding them back for years. Christ, Ethan, look at yourself. 36 years old, living in your wife's shadow, no ambition, no backbone, no idea how to make a woman happy. I stared at him. Is that really what you think of me? It's what everyone thinks of you. Rachel, your mom, Tess, we all talk about it. How you just exist. How you never fight for anything or demand anything or even notice when people are walking all over you. But I notice now. Yeah, well, congratulations. You finally grew a pair. What are you going to do with them? I picked up a knife from his kitchen counter. I'm going to show you exactly what kind of man I really am. Leo's eyes went wide. Ethan, don't do anything stupid. I cut the zip ties holding him to the chair. Run, I said quietly. What? Run, Leo. Get out of town, tonight. Change your name, find a new life, and never come back to Fernridge. He stared at me, confused. That's it? That's it. But Leo? I leaned closer. If I ever see you again, if you ever contact Rachel or anyone else in my family, if you ever so much as drive through this town, I will eliminate you. Not threaten to eliminate you, not scare you. I will actually literally end your life and dispose of your body where no one will ever find it. He believed me. I could see it in his eyes. The video will stay private as long as you disappear. Leo was gone within an hour. I never saw him again. Tess was harder to handle because she was family. And despite everything, I still felt protective of her. But she'd made her choices just like everyone else. I found her at Mom's house on Friday night, the two of them planning their next move. They were sitting in the kitchen, drinking wine and reviewing legal documents. Restraining order, Mom was saying as I walked through the back door. Mental health evaluation. Possible involuntary commitment if he becomes violent. Will it work? Tess asked. It worked on your father. I stopped in the doorway. What did you say? They both turned, startled. Mom recovered first, slipping back into her therapist persona. Ethan, sweetheart, we were just... You said it worked on my father. What worked on my father? Silence. Mom, what happened to Dad? She stood up, smoothing her skirt. The same gesture she'd made in the van. The same gesture she'd been making my whole life whenever I asked uncomfortable questions. Your father had problems, Ethan. Mental health issues. He became paranoid and delusional, and eventually we had to... We? Who's we? Tess was staring at her wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. The doctors and I, Mom continued, we had to make some difficult decisions for everyone's safety. Where is he now? You know where he is? Hillcrest Memorial Gardens. We visit his grave every Christmas. No, I said slowly. Where is he really? Mom's calm mask slipped for just a second. I don't know what you mean. But I could see the truth in her eyes. The same cold calculation I'd seen in the van. The same clinical detachment she'd shown while watching her son's wife get screwed by strangers. He's not dead, is he? Of course he's dead. We had a funeral. You had a funeral for an empty coffin. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. Hillcrest Memorial Gardens has digital records going back 40 years. I hacked into their system last week. There's no burial record for James Darrow. No body was ever interred in that plot. Tess finally looked up from her wine. Ethan, don't... Where is my father? Mom sat back down, her composure completely gone now. Pine Valley State Hospital. Ward 7, he's been there for 15 years. The room spun around me. 15 years? He's been alive for 15 years and you told me he was dead? He might as well be dead. The medications, the treatments, he doesn't even remember who he is most days. What did you do to him? I saved this family. Mom's voice cracked like a whip. He was going to destroy everything. He found out about my work, about the people I was helping, about the research I was conducting. What research? Behavioral modification, social control, using psychological techniques to manage problematic individuals. Her eyes were bright with the fever of someone defending their life's work. I was pioneering new approaches to family therapy, relationship counseling, community intervention. You were experimenting on people. I was helping them, giving them outlets for their repressed desires, teaching them to embrace their authentic selves, showing them how to transcend society's artificial constraints, by organizing Zex cults, by creating safe spaces for human expression. Mom stood up. Again, pacing now. Do you have any idea how many marriages I saved? How many people I freed from their psychological prisons? How many lives I improved? What about my life, Mom? What about Dad's life? What about the life you stole from me by lying about everything for 15 damn years? Your life was protected? You were kept safe from knowledge that would have destroyed you? Like it destroyed Dad? Your father was weak, just like you. He couldn't handle the complexity of adult relationships. He couldn't understand that love and sex are separate things, that marriage is a social contract, not a romantic fairy tale. I stared at this woman who'd raised me, who'd read me bedtime stories and bandaged my scraped knees and taught me to ride a bicycle, this stranger wearing my mother's face. Where does it end, Mom? The lying, the manipulation, the control. Where does it end? It ends when people stop being so fragile, when they stop needing to be protected from reality. Whose reality? Yours? She smiled then, and for the first time I saw the real Nina Darrow, not the caring mother or the concerned therapist or the retired professional, the carnivore who'd been hiding beneath all those masks. Reality is whatever the strongest person in the room says it is, Ethan. And I've always been the strongest person in this family. I looked at Tess, who was still staring at her wine glass. Did you know? I asked her. About Dad? She nodded without looking up. How long have you known? Since I was 18, Mom told me when I started college. And you never thought to tell me? She said it would hurt you. She said you were too sensitive to handle it. Too sensitive? I laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. Too weak, too stupid, too fragile. Is that really what you all think of me? Tess finally met my eyes. We were trying to protect you. From what? From becoming like Dad. And what's Dad like, Tess? What's he really like? She glanced at Mom, who nodded permission. Paranoid, Tess said quietly. Obsessive. He started recording phone calls, following Mom around, accusing her of things. He installed cameras in the house. He threatened to hurt people who he thought were working against him. The words hit me like physical blows. Phone calls, cameras, following people, threatening violence, just like I'd been doing for the past month. You're worried I'm going to end up like him, I said. The signs are all there, Mom said gently, her therapist voice back in place. The paranoia, the surveillance equipment, the isolation from friends and family, the violent fantasies. What violent fantasies? Leo told us about your conversation before he left town, the threats you made, the knife you showed him, the detailed descriptions of how you'd dispose of his body. I felt the walls closing in. Everything I'd done, every move I'd made, they'd been analyzing it through their professional lens, cataloging my behavior, building a case. We want to help you, Ethan, Mom continued. Before you cross a line you can't come back from, before you hurt someone or yourself. Help me how? Voluntary admission to Pine Valley, short-term evaluation, medication to help with the paranoid thoughts, therapy to process your feelings about the marriage. And if I don't volunteer? Mom's smile was patient and understanding. Then we'll have to make the choice for you. Rachel's already signed the paperwork. The police are aware of your threats against Leo. Judge Patterson's replacement is very sympathetic to mental health interventions. You've planned this whole thing. We've planned for contingencies. It's what responsible people do when someone they love is in crisis. I looked around the kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals as a child. At the table where I'd done homework and talked about school and shared family jokes. At the woman who'd given birth to me and raised me and now wanted to erase me. Can I see him? I asked quietly. Who? Dad, can I visit him? Mom hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea right now. He's not himself. I want to see what you did to him, what you're planning to do to me. Ethan, one visit, then I'll consider your offer. She studied my face like she was reading a psychological evaluation. One visit, supervised. And then we talk about treatment options. I nodded. Deal. Pine Valley State Hospital sat on 200 acres of forested hills an hour north of Fern Ridge. From the outside, it looked like a college campus. Brick buildings, manicured lawns, winding pathways. Only the discreet security measures gave away its true purpose. Mom had called ahead. We were met at the entrance by Dr. Sarah Chen, a young psychiatrist who spoke about my father like he was an interesting case study rather than a human being. James has been with us for 15 years, she explained, as we walked through sterile hallways lined with cheerful artwork. chronic paranoid delusions, persistent audio hallucinations, severe trust issues. He's responded well to medication, but there's been significant cognitive decline. What kind of delusions? I asked. He believes his family is involved in some kind of conspiracy against him. He thinks his wife organized a network of people to monitor and control his behavior. Classic paranoid schizophrenia presentation. We stopped outside a heavy door, marked with the number 247. He may not recognize you, Dr. Chen warned. The medications can affect memory formation, and please don't take anything he says personally. The delusions can make him say hurtful things. She unlocked the door and led us into a small room furnished with a bed, a desk, and 2 plastic chairs. A man in gray pajamas sat by the window, staring out at the parking lot. He looked like me, older, thinner, grayer, but unmistakably my father. The man I'd mourned for 15 years was sitting 10 feet away, alive and breathing and lost in whatever chemical fog they'd wrapped around his mind. James, Dr. Chen said gently, you have visitors. Dad turned slowly, his movements mechanical and deliberate. When he saw Mom, his eyes hardened. You, he said in a voice like sandpaper. Hello, James. I brought someone to see you. Dad's gaze shifted to me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of recognition, then confusion, then something that might have been hope. Ethan, his voice cracked. My God, you're so tall. How old are you now? 36, Dad. 36. He shook his head. I missed everything, didn't I? Your whole life. Not everything. He studied my face with desperate intensity, like he was trying to memorize it. You look tired. Are you sleeping? Sometimes. Are you married? I glanced at Mom, who was watching this reunion with clinical detachment. Yes. Good. That's good. What's her name? Rachel. Dad's expression darkened. Rachel. Pretty name. Do you trust her, Ethan? I used to. But not anymore? Not anymore. Dad nodded slowly. Trust is fragile. Once it breaks, it never quite fits back together the same way. James, Mom interrupted. Perhaps we should... Shut up, Nina. Dad's voice carried surprising authority for someone supposedly lost in delusions. I'm talking to my son. He turned back to me. She told you I was dead, didn't she? Yes. What else did she tell you? That you had mental health problems. That you became paranoid and dangerous. Dad laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Paranoid? Yes, I suppose I was paranoid. When you discover that your wife is running psychological experiments on your neighbors, when you find out she's using Zex and blackmail to control half the town's leadership, when you realize she's been sedating your food to make you more compliant, paranoia seems like a reasonable response. That's not what happened, Mom said firmly. James, you know that's not what happened. Don't I? Dad stood up, moving with sudden energy. Then explain the cameras I found in our bedroom. Explain the medications I never prescribed that kept showing up in my blood work. Explain the audio recordings of our private conversations that somehow ended up in other people's hands. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What cameras? Hidden throughout the house. Your mother was documenting everything. Our fights, our conversations, our intimate moments. She was building case files on everyone in town, looking for leverage and pressure points. James suffers from paranoid delusions, Dr. Chen said quietly. He often believes he's being monitored or controlled. Show him the files, Dad said, looking directly at Mom. Show him the psychological profiles you built on every person in Fernridge. Show him the blackmail material. Show him the research data. Mom's face had gone pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Room 247B, Dad said to me. Storage unit behind the Walmart. Nina rented it under her maiden name. The key is taped under the desk drawer in her home office. James, please. Everything's there, Ethan. 15 years of documentation. Photographs, audio recordings, psychological evaluations, financial records. Your mother didn't just run a Zex club. She ran a social control experiment using the entire town as her laboratory. I stared at Mom, looking for denial in her eyes. Instead, I saw calculation. Even if that were true, she said carefully, it doesn't change your current situation. You're exhibiting the same paranoid behaviors as your father, the same obsessive patterns, the same violent tendencies. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm just finally seeing things clearly. The drive back to Fernridge was silent. Mom stared out the passenger window while I processed everything I'd learned. My father wasn't crazy, or if he was, he'd been driven there by 15 years of systematic psychological torture. The storage unit was exactly where Dad said it would be. The key was under Mom's desk drawer. And inside Unit 247B, I found 20 banker's boxes filled with the evidence of my mother's life's work. Files on hundreds of people, psychological profiles, sexual preferences, financial vulnerabilities, family secrets, audio recordings of private conversations obtained through illegal surveillance, photographs taken without consent, medical records stolen from doctors' offices, and detailed research notes documenting how she'd used this information to manipulate and control people's behavior. Mayor Coldwell's file was 6 inches thick. She'd known about his taste for young girls since 2018 and had been using it to influence city policy for years. Police Chief Martinez had been feeding her information about ongoing investigations in exchange for compromising photos of his wife. Judge Patterson had been taking bribes from club members in exchange for favorable rulings, and at the bottom of the last box, I found my own file. Subject: Ethan James Darrow. Classification: Long-term control study objective. Determine optimal methods for managing paranoid personality traits through environmental manipulation and social isolation. The file contained everything: detailed notes about my childhood behaviors, analysis of my relationship patterns, plans for interventions designed to keep me dependent and controllable, and a timeline showing how they'd systematically destroyed every friendship, every job opportunity, every chance at independence I'd ever had. The radio station job I'd lost. Mom had called my supervisor and suggested I was having emotional difficulties that might affect my work performance. The friends who'd gradually drifted away over the years, Mom had contacted them with concerns about my increasingly erratic behavior. Even Rachel's affair with Leo had been planned, a calculated strategy to create the exact crisis that would justify having me committed. I sat in that storage unit for hours, reading about my life through my mother's clinical eyes. Every moment of pain, every loss, every humiliation had been carefully orchestrated to create the exact psychological profile they needed. They'd turned me into my father, paranoid, isolated, obsessive, so they could justify doing to me what they'd done to him. But there was one thing they hadn't counted on. I wasn't my father. I drove home and found Rachel waiting in the kitchen with divorce papers and a concerned expression. "Sit down, Ethan," she said gently. "We need to talk." I sat. "About the divorce? About getting you help?" Your mother explained what happened at the hospital, how you're starting to believe the same delusions as your father. What if they're not delusions? Rachel's face showed practiced sympathy. "Honey, I know this is hard to accept, but sometimes our minds play tricks on us. Sometimes we see patterns that aren't really there." "Like the pattern of you fucking Leo for 3 years?" She flinched. "That was complicated." "I made mistakes, and I'm sorry. But it doesn't change the fact that you need professional help. Help like Dad got? Your father is sick, Ethan. He always was. Nina did everything she could to save your family, but some people just can't be helped." I pulled out one of the files from Mom's storage unit. Rachel's file. Subject: Rachel Marie Darrow. I read aloud. Classification: Primary asset in long-term control study. Recruitment date: March 15th, 2019. Compensation: financial support, sexual fulfillment, social advancement. Rachel's face went white. Sexual preferences, I continued reading. Submissive, enjoys public performance, responds to authority figures. Psychological profile: narcissistic tendencies, craves attention and validation, willing to betray intimate relationships for personal gratification. Where did you get that? Mom's research files. 20 years of data collection on everyone in town, including detailed notes on how to manipulate their behavior. I flipped through more pages. Here's my favorite part. Rachel expresses genuine affection for subject, but prioritizes her own needs above relationship stability. Recommend gradual escalation of affair to create marital crisis suitable for intervention. Rachel stared at the papers like they were radioactive. She told me, she said it was to help you, that you needed to experience real emotional growth. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. I was unhappy, Ethan. Our marriage was, she searched for words, empty, going through the motions. I felt like I was disappearing. So you decided to make me disappear instead? Tears started running down her face. It wasn't supposed to go this far. The club, the rituals, the cameras, that wasn't part of the original plan. What was the original plan? Just the affair. Nina said it would either shock you into becoming a more engaged husband or give us grounds for a clean divorce. She said either outcome would be healthier than the stagnant marriage we had. And Leo was supposed to be temporary. Nina said he was the perfect choice because he was close enough to hurt you, but controllable enough to manage. Manage how? Rachel wiped her eyes. Financial incentives, career opportunities, and blackmail if necessary. You're all psychopaths. We're not evil, Ethan. Nina has this way of making everything seem logical, like she's the only one who understands how people really work. I closed the file and looked at my wife. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of thinking I knew this person. Are you pregnant? She nodded. 12 weeks? Is it mine? I don't know. The honesty was almost refreshing after months of lies. What happens now? She asked. Now you have a choice. You can sign a full confession detailing everything you know about Mom's operation. Names, dates, methods, sufferers, everything. And if I do that, I'll make sure you and the baby are provided for. New identity, fresh start somewhere far from Fernridge, enough money to build a decent life. And if I don't, I opened another file. This one contained photographs of Rachel with various club members, detailed financial records showing payments for sexual services, and documentation of her role in several blackmail schemes. Then you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison for conspiracy, extortion, and tax evasion, and the baby will grow up in foster care. She stared at the evidence, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally acceptance. You really are your father's son, she said quietly. No, I said, I'm exactly what you and Mom made me. The only difference is that I'm better at it than Dad was. Rachel signed the confession that night. By morning, she was on a bus to Portland with $50,000 in cash and instructions to disappear. I never saw her again. But I wasn't finished with Mom. I found her at the radio tower 3 days later, trying to destroy the equipment I'd left behind. She was dragging cables and electronics into a pile, preparing to burn everything. Hello, Mother. She turned, unsurprised to see me. I was wondering when you'd show up. Cleaning up loose ends? Something like that. She dropped a camera into the pile. Rachel told me about your conversation, about the files. All 20 years of them. You read everything? Everything. The psychological profiles, the manipulation strategies, the long-term control studies. Very thorough work, Mom. Very professional. She straightened up, brushing dirt from her hands. I was trying to help people, Ethan. To free them from the constraints of conventional morality. By blackmailing them. By showing them who they really were underneath their social masks. Most people are too afraid to embrace their authentic selves. And the ones who refused were helped to see reason. I walked closer, stepping over scattered electronics. Like Dad? Your father was a special case. He had the intelligence to understand what I was doing, but lacked the vision to appreciate its value. So you had him committed. I had him treated for a mental illness that was making him dangerous to himself and others. By diagnosing him with symptoms you'd created through psychological torture. Mom smiled. You say that like it's a bad thing. James is safe now. Medicated, supervised, unable to hurt anyone, including himself. And me? Was I supposed to end up in the room next to his? Only if you couldn't adapt to reality. Whose reality, Mom? Yours? The reality where strong people make decisions and weak people accept them. The reality where intelligence and planning matter more than sentiment and emotion. She gestured at the pile of equipment. You've demonstrated remarkable aptitude for psychological warfare, Ethan. Much better than your father. You could have been an asset. Could have been? Past tense. You've made too many mistakes, hurt too many people. The club is finished, the research is compromised, and several of our associates are facing criminal charges. Because of me. Because you chose chaos over order. Destruction over construction. I pulled out a device I'd assembled in my workshop. It looked like a large smartphone, but contained enough plastic explosive to level a small building. Speaking of destruction, I said, I have a confession to make. This conversation is being live streamed to several news outlets, law enforcement agencies, and federal investigators. Mom's eyes flicked at the device. You're bluffing. I never bluff anymore, Mom. I learned that from you. I pressed a button on the device. A small LED light began blinking red. That's the timer, I explained. 60 seconds. Enough time for you to tell the truth about everything. Dad, the club, the blackmail, all of it. or enough time for us both to become a cautionary tale about the dangers of psychological warfare. Mom stared at the blinking light. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. I've got nothing left to lose, remember? No wife, no family, no friends, no career. You made sure of that. Ethan, this is insane. 50 seconds. She looked around desperately as if searching for escape routes or weapons or some other option I hadn't considered. You want the truth? She said finally. Fine. Everything your father believed was correct. I've been running psychological control experiments on this town for 20 years. I've blackmailed politicians, manipulated elections, destroyed marriages, and ruined lives. I've used Zex and pills and financial pressure to turn ordinary people into assets for my research. Keep going. 40 seconds. I had your father committed because he discovered my work and threatened to expose it. I planned your wife's affair to create the exact psychological crisis that would justify having you committed too. I've been documenting and controlling your entire life since childhood as part of a long-term study on behavioral modification. And the club was a recruitment and control mechanism, a way to identify and leverage the sexual appetites of community leaders. The rituals, the masks, the cameras, all designed to create compromising material that could be used for coercion. 30 seconds. I don't regret any of it. Her calm facade cracked, revealing something wild and desperate underneath. Do you understand what I accomplished? I turned a mediocre mountain town into a perfectly controlled social environment. I eliminated crime, managed the economy, ensured political stability by turning everyone into blackmail sufferers, by showing them that their petty moral concerns were less important than the greater good. 20 seconds. Mom lunged for the device. I stepped back, keeping it out of reach. Please, Ethan, whatever you think I did wrong, we can fix it. We can work together. You have the intelligence, the skills. 10 seconds. I'm your mother. 9. I love you. 8. Please. 7. She fell to her knees. I'm sorry for everything. 6. Turn it off. Please, just turn it off. 5. I'll do anything. Confess to everything. Take full responsibility. 4. Don't do this. 3. Please. 2. I pressed another button. The red light stopped blinking. Timer disabled, I said quietly. But the live stream is still running. Mom collapsed forward, sobbing with relief and terror and the sudden understanding that she just confessed to 20 years of crimes in front of an audience that included federal investigators. You manipulative fool, she whispered. I learned from the best. 3 months later, Nina Darrow was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy, racketeering, and dozens of related charges. The psychological control network she'd built over 2 decades collapsed in a matter of weeks. Mayor Coldwell, Police Chief Martinez, and Judge Patterson were all convicted on corruption charges. 12 other community leaders faced various criminal penalties. The scandal made national headlines. Cable news programs ran special segments on the Fernridge conspiracy. Academic conferences were organized to study the psychological warfare techniques Mom had pioneered, and somewhere in the chaos, I disappeared. The federal investigators never found me. The local police assumed I'd fled the country. The media painted me as either a whistleblower hero or a domestic terrorist, depending on their political perspective. But I never left Fernridge. I'm still here, living under a new identity in a cabin 20 miles outside town. I work as a freelance audio technician for true crime podcasts. There's a certain irony in that I find satisfying. Rachel never tried to contact me. Leo never returned. Tess moved to California and changed her name. And Dad? I visit him every month at Pine Valley. His doctors say he's made remarkable progress since Mom's confession became public. Turns out that discovering you weren't actually crazy does wonders for your mental health. We don't talk much during our visits. Mostly, we just sit together. 2 men who survived the same psychological war by different methods. Sometimes he asks about my plans, whether I'll ever try to rebuild my life, find new relationships, start over somewhere else. I tell him I'm not sure, that some damage can't be repaired, only managed. But lately, I've been thinking about possibilities, about what it means to be free from other people's expectations and manipulations, about what kind of man I might become if I stopped defining myself by the scars other people gave me. The town of Fernridge is healing too. New leadership, new policies, new hope for the future. People are learning to trust again, slowly and carefully. And in the quiet moments between editing audio files and visiting my father and watching the sun set over the mountains, I sometimes catch myself smiling. Not because I'm happy, exactly, but because I'm finally completely free. When the ones who made you choose to break you, you discover what you become in the light.